Hi and welcome. This is Demetria Clark, the director of Heart of Herbs Herbal School, and today on the Heart of Herbs Herbal School podcast, we are speaking to Steven Yeager, who deals with quality issues at Mountain Rose Herbs. And we had a student who had some questions about the whole processes, and we thought, let's give them a call and check in with them and see what their processes are so we all can learn together about the immense steps they take to ensure quality and control from seed to final product. All right.
That's okay. We got some
All
B-roll
right,
though.
we're fine then. We got some giggle roll. All right,
Yeah,
perfect. So I guess could you quickly just let us know exactly what your role is
sure.
at Mountain
Yep,
Rose Herbs?
sure. So, hi everybody. My name is Steven Yeager. I've been with the Mountain Rose Herbs about 18 and a half years. I initially came up through the quality and regulatory department. So I held many roles. We changed my position name, but pretty much the same role over the years. My last role, I'm currently the executive vice president of Mountain Rose Herbs, but my previous role was vice president of quality and regulatory affairs. Um, so I built our quality program basically when I started 18 years ago. We didn't really have a quality program, at least written. We were doing a lot of things that you would do to have a quality product, but it wasn't documented per se to go through an FDA inspection. We didn't really have C of A's in place. So yeah, so that's my current role.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
So today we're just going to ask you questions based
Sure.
on, your role, and obviously if it's something you're like, "Oh, that's not in my I can't do that. I can't
Sure.
answer to that," then let me know. So Mountain Rose Herbs is known for sourcing certified organic herbs at scale.
Mhm.
How do you identify and vet a new supplier, and what does the vetting process actually look like in practice?
Right. So it's yeah, it can be quite complicated. It starts with the supplier qualification approval. So any new supplier or even any new supplier for a new ingredient that we haven't sourced from that supplier before goes through a qualification, and that either entails an on-site audit, but we possibly can't do on-site audits for all of our suppliers. We try, but and if we can't, we do what's called a desk audit, where we have a supplier qualification questionnaire, where we have a series of questions, things like, do you control for allergens? What are your specifications? Um, do you sterilize or not sterilize? And so it's a variety of questions that gets us a better idea of what their food safety program looks like. And that's more for the food safety and the FDA side, and also to make sure that we have a safe and effective product. But then as far as our certifications go, we're 95% organic products. So we're first determining, do they have a valid organic certification in place for their company, but also do they have that ingredient on their organic certification as well.
Wow, I didn't even think of that. That's great.
And there's a national database you can look that we can verify that as well.
Mhm.
But we also rely on our supplier to provide us that documentation.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
So, when a preferred source is unavailable due to crop failure, drought, geological disruption, how do you make the decision to find an alternative versus waiting for the original supplier to recover?
Right. So that does happen. Many of our suppliers, or if not most, we have longstanding relationships with. So when they do go through a crop failure, or they can't provide the amounts that we expected or agreed to, we generally work with them to either pay them anyway for the year, but then we might get some credit for the next harvest. But we do try and work with them because we've been in business with some of these suppliers for over 20 years. So we've watched their families grow up, and we don't quickly go to a new supplier unless we really need to. But we do generally not have all our eggs in one basket for a particular ingredient. We generally have a couple of approved suppliers, but what I would call a preferred supplier. So our preferred suppliers are again the ones that we've had longstanding relationships with. We expect a certain quality from them. They work with us when we have issues or they have issues. We work together on those issues, and then we'll have other suppliers that we qualify, what we might call a spot buy, where we might buy a certain amount to get us through or get us through the year. And but they're all qualified through the same program. The same we look at we qual it's called a supplier qualification, and it goes through the same. All suppliers go through the same requirements.
Oh, wonderful. Wow. Oh, I'm learning so much. How do you balance the desire for direct farm relationships with logistical reality of sourcing from dozens of countries simultaneously?
Right. So it really depends on the region, right? So we have a lot of domestic farm partners who we work directly with the farms. And so it's just a direct relationship. We work with them on certain crops. We have a strong partner in Oregon. We have one in Washington State. Um, but there is other ingredients that it's always been a co-op model. I can give you an example of, say, like chili peppers in India. You have a number of small uh, growers who are family growers from different parts of the region. They're growing the cayenne pepper, and then they're drying it, and then they're sending it to a consolidator who puts all those lots together, all those different um, sources together, and makes it generally one lot, and then we work through that broker to buy it from them. So I think that's answering your question, but it really depends on the region. So another example would be in Europe or on the East Coast with the wild harvested materials. Generally, those are multiple sources that are then brought to a consolidator, and we work with the consolidator.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
a part of our food safety, our supplier qualification is not just looking at um, food safety, it's also looking at workers' rights and how are they handling sustainability for the ingredient as well as sustainability for, I would say, for the persons actually harvesting and digging the materials.
Nice, nice. So, how has climate change affected
And I
source?
can
Oh, sorry.
I add to that one real quick?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
what we try to do with many of those ingredients is we have fair trade offerings, and that helps us because we can't get to all of these regions. So working with fair trade, we work with Fair for Life. Um, we rely on the company who we're buying from to they're audited yearly by their fair trade audit, and then they have to meet certain standards, and that's one way we can rely on making sure that workers are getting paid correctly, et cetera. And that's the same with the organic certifiers. So there's all of the organic certifiers need to meet a certain standard for the National Organic Program. So they're aligned with the National Organic Program. And then also we've been increasing our offerings of Fair Wild certified, which strictly deals with wild harvested materials. And it's similar process where you need to meet certain standards that for workers' rights as well as the plants and the ecosystems.
Cool. I was going to ask you about that stuff, so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that you
We,
brought that up on your own. I love that. How has climate change affected sourcing in practical, observable ways over the last 10 years? Have you been seeing a lot of, I mean, I know just where I live, the things that I always could kind of grow without thinking about. Now I have to be like, there's actually going to probably be a drought this summer. Like
yeah.
I'm thinking about things differently. Are you guys too?
Well, we're trying it. There's definitely a real threat with climate change, and it's well known. It's not well known. It's known. Our industry as a whole is really, concerned about it. I work with the American Herbal Products Association. It's one of our top agenda items in our sustainability committee. Um, I mean, some examples are it's different. Turmeric in India was affected by the monsoons, and that has to be contributing to climate. The climate change must be contributing it. There is research and data out there that suggests that there's a direct correlation with the monsoons and climate change and affecting the turmeric harvest, the ashwagandha harvest. Locally here in the Northwest, we're seeing harvest times change on ingredients. So something that might have, like plantain leaf, for example, that might have been harvested at a certain time before it goes to seed or fruit, We're finding that the farmers are now having to readjust their harvest times to, make sure they're harvesting it in bud and flower for the aerial portions. So there's many different instances like that where we're starting to see change. And I do think it is going to be, I mean, we're going to have to adjust because I think some of the botanicals that grow in certain regions just won't. And so there's going to have to be a huge shift in who's growing what where. And that's hard because we don't just want to, if someone's been growing elderberries in Eastern Europe or harvesting elderberries, we don't just want to move on to the company further north that can harvest it now. We have to figure out solutions that just doesn't drop farmers who have been traditionally doing this literally for hundreds of thousands, in fact, not if not thousands of years. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is a real, I mean, that is a real concern. I mean, if especially when you've had such long and deep relationships with people, it's not like, hey, you can't come to the dance. I'm taking other
Yeah.
people. I mean,
Right. Right.
that's not nice. But
No.
I know it's
So,
business, but I mean,
yeah,
it is you're trying to
no.
build a sustainability practice.
So I guess my answer is that we have a lot of questions right now, but no real answers. We're working on things, but gathering a lot of questions, seeing a lot of effects from climate change, but we're trying to figure out solutions, and that's going to, I think, take some time. And I think it's going to take an industry effort across many companies to and suppliers to work on that together. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I appreciate the fact that you try to continue to work with people because you can't just say to someone who's been growing something for you, for 18 years, oh, by the way, climate change so just pivot to this one instead.
Yeah.
It's
Although that might be one of the solutions, it might be part
yeah,
of the solution, but yeah, it's complicated. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So adulteration is a serious and growing problem, and you touched on that briefly,
Hmm.
particularly with powders.
Hmm.
Which herbs are you guys like are on your radar to be particularly vigilant about? Is it like the superstar herb of the year that's coming in the powder, or is it just like we just are
Hmm.
vigilant with all of them? And what does the testing protocol look like to make sure everything is what it says it is on the box?
Right. So well, one, I would say definitely. Well, first I'll start with Mountain Rose generally tries not to buy powders. We have our own mill, in-house mill. We work with third-party mills. So whenever possible, we try to get materials in what I would say either whole or rough cut material, and then we cut and sift it. We make a cut and sift or powdered material out of that. Not only is it easier to identify, it's also easier to test. It's just yeah, and well, the main
Pressure
it's
longer.
it's also fresher longer. That's absolutely correct. So the less surface area, as soon as you create more surface area, you're lessening the shelf life on that
Yeah.
botanical. So if when you buy a powder, it's already been maybe somewhat oxidized, and it can be have a shorter shelf life. But we do have to some powders we do need to buy direct. Um, Mainly we don't see too much economically motivated, I would call it economically motivated adulteration. I think that's just because the suppliers' integrity that we work with, and we don't buy from fly-by-night suppliers. So, but there is economically motivated material on the market, and things like elderberry, I would say, is a big one. Elderberry powder, turmeric could be adulterated. Some of those really ashwagandha these days, anything that becomes very popular, especially very popular fast, to your point, because then the supply can't meet the demand at first. But with the herbs, we're able to we perform very rigorous identity testing. We use organoleptic and macroscopy techniques. We also use microscopy, and we use also high performance thin layer chromatography. My body's in background, so I'm very, very particular about that we have the correct genus and species with all of our botanicals. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I think the thing is that I'm not trying to push anything here for anyone who's listening,
Mhm.
but if you have fair trade and fair business practices that are well rooted and really connecting with the farmers and all of that, I think that that probably makes your process easier because you're not dealing with fly by night. You know the history of that you have a real business relationship that's gone on for years. So I thank you for sharing more about that.
That's correct. Yeah, these relationships, we trust our suppliers, they trust us. But then we also do the testing.
Yeah,
We
well, yeah, I mean,
and more what we might see is not intentionally intentional adulteration. We might see that in Europe, a good example is maybe horehound. In Europe, there's a couple species that they've used medicinally for years. We use the Maribarum vulgare is traditionally what's used on the market, but there is another species, I can't think of it, that has been used by the people in that area for centuries, and they use them interchangeably. But we sometimes see they might have picked the wrong species by mistake. Not that it's not a safety issue, but we won't sell it because we want to sell, the genus and species that we're advertising. So more so, we won't see economically motivated adulteration, but we might see might just need to go back to those suppliers and say, well, can you please retrain your harvesters to wild harvest this horehound, you know, to teach them to differentiate the two different species. And I would say just in general, if it's cheap and it doesn't, and there's why is it so cheap, then I would really question the source. You get what you pay for, yeah.
I say that all the time. I'm like, and that's, yeah, I agree with that 100%. Um, so you kind of told us, oh, I was going to ask you about identification, but you kind of told us about that in your example, so that was great. So heavy metals, pesticide residues, and microbial contamination are the three most common quality failure points in botanical
Mhm,
medicine. Which of these has
mhm.
been most challenging for you guys to manage consistently and why?
Um, None of them really consistently. I can describe our testing program. So like I said, we test all of our ingredients for identity. The oils can be more of a challenge, and so with the herbs, they're all can be their own challenges depending on the ingredient and the region they come from. Some herbs have microbial issues. Um, some are wild harvested materials can have more microbial issues. It really depends on the plant and even the form of the plant. So some plants that are low growing on the ground and like gotu kola is a good example. It can pick up just bacteria from the ground. It's not necessarily harmful bacteria, but it could have high bacterial counts. So we're testing all of our ingredients for pathogens such as Salmonella and E. coli 0157, and those are the very nasty pathogens that can cause harm. But then we have other ingredients, other microbes that we test mainly for quality indicators or spoilage organisms. So that's like general E. coli's, total coliforms, total bacteria count, and yeast and molds. And those aren't necessarily indicative of a pathogen, but if they do have levels that are out of our specifications, that could mean they might spoil faster or yeah, or if they're really, really high levels, it could be indicative of a pathogen we don't test for. So we do see ingredients that sometimes don't meet those spoilage organisms specifications, and then we do need to sterilize. And generally, we do steam sterilization, which is allowed through certified organic. It's allowed through the Certified Organic National Organic Program. Um, Heavy metals and pesticides. So micros we test for all herbal ingredients. Uh,
Mm.
Pesticides and heavy metals, we focus on those based on what's called a risk assessment. So we have a matrix that's based on country of origin, history with supplier, history of that ingredient on the marketplace. We also look at recalls and just marketplace research to determine if it's even a risk for heavy metals or pesticides. Like for example, many herbs out of India are a risk for heavy metals, so we test all of our ingredients from India. But it really depends on that risk assessment. We don't see too many herbs that are over spec for heavy metals, but we do occasionally. And then as far as pesticides, yes, occasionally we do see herbs that contain pesticides, and we test those that are a risk for pesticides. Yeah. Aflatoxins is another one that we can see are a risk in certain, especially peppers.
Okay, well, thank you. So, Mountain Rose holds a USDA Organic, Fair Trade, and several other certifications. From an operational standpoint, which certification is the most demanding to maintain and why?
They all have their nuances. Our most our most demanding is not a certification, but is being FDA GMP compliant. That's definitely our hardest to maintain, but that's not a certification. Well, although we are third party certified for our GMPs, so that's probably the hardest certification is our good manufacturing practice because it just encompasses everything that we do. So from the time we buy the product to the time we ship it out the door. So that's probably our hardest, our most engrossed a certification. The organic one's challenging for us just because of the sheer number of suppliers that we have. So we have to make sure that every one of those suppliers have active certifications and that, like I said earlier, that ingredient's on the certification. And so anytime we get a shipment in, we have an employee who's checking to make sure it's on the cert and that the cert is active. And that's like with not with over thousands of SKUs and most of them organic. That's almost a part-time job for that one regulatory person. Um, and then we also have the fair trade and the fair wild and now regenerative organic. They can each year we're have an audit, an in-person audit to maintain those certifications. So those also are very rigorous. I would say the certified organic and the fair trade are the most rigorous of them all, which they're generally a 2-day audit each, where we go through everywhere from the time we bought the product, received the product to the till it went to a customer, and it can be yeah, it's 2 hours of question, I mean 2 days of questions and providing documents. Traceability is a big one, and that's a big thing with all these certifications is that uh, if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. So we can say that we did it a certain way, or we can say that we manufactured it this way, or that we checked the certs. But they want to see actual tangible evidence that we followed through with all this, meeting all the standards these certifications require.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm loving this. So okay, so we know that you guys go beyond the regulatory minimum for most of this stuff. So I'm not even gonna ask you about that because
Mm,
you've let us know
mm.
in your answers. So how do you think the tension between the increasing demand for wildcrafted herbs and sustainability of wild plant populations, how do you guys balance that? Because I know, at least as an educator, I'm kind of like, I don't care if you want it. If it's
Mhm.
on a let's not harvest list, not that it's necessarily even endangered or serious at
Mhm.
risk at, let's not
Mhm.
even let it get there. It's on a
Yeah.
watch list. You don't need it that bad. And
Right.
so like, so how do you guys balance that the desire for the probably primarily American consumer to get what they want when they want?
Yeah.
Um,
That's that's a good question and a very complicated question. I can think I could start is that Mountain Rose tries to move most or wild harvested ingredients to cultivation. Although that question is really a species by species answer, right? So golden seal root harvest only grows in in Appalachia on the east coast of the United States or eastern mountains of the United States. And so that,
that's
has,
where we are.
yeah, so, that there's quite a world demand for that ingredient. So Mountain Rose will never, has made a decision never to purchase wild harvested golden seal. So we have a partner who grows it organically and we work with them exclusively. But then you have other plants, let's say like, trying to think of just another plant like maybe cleavers that's very weedy. And if you can have harvesters who are harvesting it in an area that it grows naturally and is from a clean source that's been tested, it might be more ecologically, it might be, better ecologically to harvest that wild harvested cleavers than try and grow it in a farm setting where you have to, fertilize the soil, add all these amendments. Maybe if it's a shade, it needs shade. You have to put all this plastic for the on the ground and shade cloth. So it's really a species by species as far as the sustainability of these different ingredients. But certain herbs that for me, it gets to in Mountain Rose is that especially these herbs that are endemic to only certain places on Earth, like white sage is a good example. White sage is weedy where it grows, but if everybody in the world wants white sage to smudge with, there's a lot of pressure on white sage. So Mountain Rose made a decision that we're not going to get wild harvested white sage anymore. We work with a farm down in Southern California that is doing some forest farming where they have property that white sage likes to grow, and they're just enhancing promoting it to grow there and taking what we might call forest farming, although it's not a forest, but you might call forest farming where they're encouraging it to grow where it would naturally grow. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's some of the ways we kind of balance that out is that if if it's an ingredient that we feel has extreme pressure on it, we either won't sell it or we'll move to cultivation on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I love that answer. We grow some things that we never harvest. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Like there's stuff we put in the woods where
Mhm.
um and we never come back. That's it.
Mhm.
We never because we just want to bring the plant stands up and I'm always talking to students and I'm like, if it's called poaching, it's
Mhm.
poaching. Like it's a federal crime.
Yeah.
It's poaching. So it's not just animals that get poached. We poach plants too. And there are people out there who will, they're locked and loaded and they're going to protect the areas they poach. So we need to be sustainable and ethical and not, cross that line into, but I want it.
Right. Yeah.
Like because it really isn't about you and herbalism. You know what I mean? There's more to life than just you.
Yeah, I used to teach wild harvesting at the Columbine School of Botanical Studies. I taught there I don't know if you know Hallie Brownstein, but I
Mhm.
worked with him for over 20 years. And
Not personally, but I know of
we
them. I
used
may have
to
met them
we
once or
used to
twice.
have we used to have a saying it's easy to pick plants, the hard part's not picking. And that's kind of just because it's so easy to just go out and you're excited about a certain plant and pick it, but to take a and that, what we're saying is take a step back, think it through, think about what your impact is going to be on the stand and the plants, and you'll be a much more powerful wild harvester if you take the time to say, I'm not going to pick today, I'm going to learn today, and then maybe come back and pick later. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to have some T-shirts that had a quote from Robbie Robertson from the band "Take what you need, leave the rest."
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Right.
so um,
Uh, but yeah, we always also emphasize in our supplier qualifications for wild harvested materials, does the harvester have permission or permits?
oh, that's a good one too. Yeah, yeah. The thrill of going out and getting something that you're looking for is a very addictive
Hmm.
feeling, I think, for a
Yeah.
lot of people,
Mhm.
and being able to regulate that, I think is probably harder than most people realize and to
Mhm.
say, no, I don't need this right now. Well, you can see the way that we consume in our country. So why would our consumption of wild herbs be any different?
Yeah.
I always have this incredible pet peeve that drives me crazy when people harvest a bunch of stuff and then they ask on social media, what is this? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, what did you do that for?
How do I use this? Yeah,
Yes.
Me and Howie call that plant lust. I need the
Oh, that's a good
herb.
one.
I need the herb right now. Sick children at home. No,
Yeah.
you can make better decisions if you say no today, and there's other things you can do.
Yeah, we joke, go to your spice rack, your
Yeah.
medicine cabinet, and your herbal tea drawer
Yeah.
before you go and go outside. So,
Well, these days you can just go to the store on the internet and buy herbs. I mean, when I first started in the 90s, it was you could go to a health food store and buy herbs, but now herbs are everywhere.
so I will say, I don't actually know that struggle. And this is kind of funny. When I was in fourth grade, our next door neighbors owned the largest herbal distributing company
Okay.
in the United States. And they used to like ship herbs to like Frontier, like all these different places.
Hmm.
And their daughter was like a good friend of mine. And so I grew up and they had these warehouses. So when people were like, it's so hard to find herbs as I was getting older, I'm like, why?
Yeah.
It just like didn't occur to me this wasn't normal. So So,
Lucky you. You were
yeah,
in
yeah,
good
no, I
spot.
mean their barn always smelled amazing. But anyways, so what do you wish clinical herbalist, formulators, home herbalist understood about the supply chain and how they specify or source ingredients or even their levels of patience when something's out of stock? Like, what would you like people to know? Like, hey, it's not out of stock because we want it to be. Like,
Yeah.
it's out of stock because we're literally working with someone right now. Like,
Yeah.
what would you like them to know?
Yeah, out of stocks are if something's out of stock, there's a good reason for it. So I'll start there. I mean, there's a lot that goes into getting an herb in stock, from like I said in the beginning, the supplier qualification, the getting the herb to our facility, the weeks of testing before we release it into our production warehouses, the filling of the bags, and then getting it shipped out. That requires time and patience. We have a lot of processes and control points in place. And another thing is that sometimes we get a pre-shipped sample and it just doesn't meet our aesthetics and quality. Like, just we know we can't sell this. This is garbage, or it's just not doesn't meet our quality standards. We're going to need to get a different lot, or it might be better used in a tincture where you're not, maybe the constituents are still there, but we rely a lot on aesthetics because we're selling dried herbs.
Yeah, yeah.
So that herb might be better used in an extract or a capsule or a tea bag. What I would, there's a lot that goes into having something in stock. So if something's out of stock, it might be a good thing because it might mean the integrity of that company's there. Or I know at Mountain Rose, that's our integrity is that we don't want to sell something that we wouldn't want to use, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's or perhaps it did have some drift contamination of pesticides or something happened in the drying and the microbes are really high and we want to make sure we have a safe, so we're going to sterilize it or we need to reject it. Um,
Hmm.
so I would just ask that customers have that patience and also ask questions. Ask questions of your supplier. We have a wonderful customer service team where we have real people answering phones and on the chat, and you can ask questions on why, and they might not always have the answer, but they might tell you have a good idea when it might be coming in again. Also, I would recommend that customers ask for certificates of analysis from their suppliers, which shows the testing that's been performed. I think companies should provide that. We provide what's called a C of A for every one of our products. So, um, I guess yeah, the way the world is. If I can at least speak for Mountain Rose Herbs. If it's out of stocks, there's a very good reason why it's out of stock, and most likely the quality is not meeting. It's not meeting our quality standards.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad I heard that from you because that's what I say. I just say get yourself on the waiting list. I'll let you know when it's back in stock. Because I will say,
Excuse me.
yeah, I'm sorry, we're making you talk so much.
Oh no,
Sometimes,
it's okay.
you know.
Yeah, there's been the crud going around here. I'm over it, but there's still some lingering wrong.
Oh,
Yeah,
we're dealing with pollen, so I thought
yeah.
maybe pollen,
It could be
when you get
that
that
too. Yeah,
pollen in your
could be
throat and
that.
then you're like,
Yeah, yeah. We have the tree pollen this time of year.
yeah. So I'm gonna let you go because
Okay.
is there anything else you want to share, like as far as that you think that students would find beneficial and useful on the processes or anything like that? Because I think that this is a great
Yeah,
opportunity for us to like, hear anything that you guys, want to share. I think you've gone over
yeah,
so
yeah.
many great
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
So,
I guess yeah. Like I said, we really pride ourselves on not selling ingredients that we wouldn't want to use here. So that's our integrity. Is that but we have a saying: if you can't grow it or get it locally, then Mountain Rose is probably the best option.
oh, I like that. And
Yeah,
I will say
yeah.
I have never, um, not to be a total butt kisser, but I have never gotten anything that I've been disappointed in. And when I've seen, because social media is a crazy world, right? When people get upset about something,
Mhm.
the way Mountain Rose responds is always with like thoughtful integrity.
Mhm.
because I know as a business owner, I mean, I started Heart of Herbs in 98
Mm.
and I started my first herbal business when I was 22 online. So this is back when,
I
this is
remember.
a long time ago.
Yep.
And so that makes me 104. No. But it definitely is one of these things where was I going with this? Who knows? Oh my gosh. But anyways, like I just think it's super important that if you know of something that is good,
Mhm.
we're really good at letting people know
Yep.
the crap that we come in
Mhm.
contact with. We're not really good at letting people know the good always. And I
Right.
think that is a really bad practice.
We have a lot of vocal customers who tell us the good and the bad all the time, but mostly good. So that's good. But yeah, we don't claim to always have the best out there because, like I said, if you can grow it or you can get it locally from your local farms, you should do that. And then, but then if you need to source more or you can't get it in those sources, that I think we're the best option. Yeah.
Yeah, we've always been really happy. So I want to just say thank you so much for your time.
Yep.
I really, really appreciate it. I know it's very valuable
Yep.
and that you have a work day ahead of you still. So
Yep. Okay.
thank you so much.
Yep.
And I just really appreciate it. You want to learn more about herbalism and herbal education? Visit us online at www.heartofherbs.com. Feel free to like, follow, subscribe to our channel, do whatever you can to keep connected with us so we can do whatever we can to keep connected with you. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.